Like a good chunk of the community, I also am not that big of a fan of DMC 2013, or was not a big fan of 2013. Regardless of how I reach into the conclusion, I did reach into a similar conclusion that it is not really Devil May Cry, and it just did not sit well with me. Coming off of DMC 4 at the same year, because that's when I played it, DMC 2013 did not exactly hit the mark for me. The tone was different, the characters were different, and also the combat felt restrictive, which is something that really irked me a bit, and I did not exactly had the most satisfying end to it, despite the fact that I did complete the game. But that was back in 2013. I was just a college kid, and I was just having a little snippets of gaming every now and then. And now when I'm getting to actually play a lot of different games, I'm actually getting the itch again to play a proper character action game like Devil May Cry. But the thing is, the only other character action game that is like Devil May Cry is Devil May Cry itself. And so given the history that I have with this series and with that particular game, I thought why not just give it another try and see if my perspective have changed right now, and was I really right in judging that game like the way I did back then. With that said, I'll just address one thing right now. I will not be addressing anything regarding the developers' controversies in this game, because at the time I did not really know too much, and even though during some point of time or during the last few years I did think that I knew what exactly went through, the reality is that I do not know anything about it. So I will just stay far from that topic, and also it's been more than a decade now, so I don't think it's any more relevant at this point. So as I was saying, the only other game that is like Devil May Cry is Devil May Cry itself. And my goodness, I am not mistaken about that. Getting into this game on 2025, it felt very, very refreshing. I have been playing a few action combat games here and there, but even though they were flashy, they did have cool moves and all, it does not hit the itch as in Devil May Cry. The combination of the music and the combat system is just something very, very special, and DMC 2013 did capture it by a good bit. There are different weapons that I can use, and all of those weapons have different movesets, albeit the execution for those moves are pretty much the same, but they still have different effects, and those were really awesome to see. And apart from that, of course, the animation did put everything very well together. But more importantly, as I was saying, the combat system just felt different. I can execute any move at any time I want, at any sequence I want. There was no limitations for those, and oftentimes in other games it often felt limited because we just had the basic attacks, and then we need to press RT or LT and then press one of the face buttons to do the move, or maybe there is a combat flow combo chart that we need to follow in order to execute certain kind of moves. So those things were not there in DMC, and that is something that I really like about this particular franchise. And true to its original root, DMC 2013 actually carried that forward, and they executed it excellently, and it was very, very exhilarating to actually feel that combat system once again. To boost this, we have the enemy designs. The enemies were very different from the traditional DMC, but again they were very unique in its own design, and also the fact that we need to use different weapons or different skill set to actually deal with the different enemies more efficiently felt very refreshing. Now again, this might be something that they have tuned in, because initially when I played it, I remember that I was a bit annoyed by this fact, but then again maybe the bias was playing a lot of part in it. But now that I played properly with more open mind, I just loved it so much by the fact that there are different enemies where I need to approach a bit differently in order to deal with them while keeping the flow of the combat. That is the amazing thing about it. That sure, I need to actually deal with different enemies a bit differently, but that doesn't break the flow of the combat. It doesn't make me defensive at any time. I can keep the aggression going, I can keep the combat flow going smoothly, and that was really, really impressive. And of course, as I already said, all these things tied up amazingly with the freaking awesome music. It was just a great callback to the original Devil May Cry, and I just loved it a lot. It was a very, very adrenaline-filled experience, and it was just exhilarating to actually experience all these once again. Oh, and I also forgot to mention that we can actually use environments to actually damage enemies, like the clip over here. Really great, really, really great. Now this game did not just make another Devil May Cry, they actually enhanced the formula a bit, in the sense that they actually make platforming sections really interesting, and they actually synced in properly. A very clever approach really of dividing the world into the real world and the other world. I forgot the name of it. I think it's called Limbo. It is called Limbo, right? And then that actually impacts the overall theme, where we can bring in platforming together, and the more importantly, The platforming sections were actually very, very good. I remember in Devil May Cry 4, there were certain platforming sections that were absolutely horrendous. And the fact that this game actually gets it right gives them actually one up over the actual traditional games. Hey, no hate though, don't bring anything to the comment section. I'm just saying the fact over here is that the platforming is freaking good in DMC Devil May Cry. And not only that, the transition between the platforming sections and the combat sections is very smooth, and it keeps the gameplay engaging continuously at a good level. The game does not exactly let me rest, but that's in a good way. At times when games continuously keeps us engaged, it can be a bit tiring, but in case of DMC Devil May Cry or Devil May Cry 2013, the on and off between combat and platforming section actually made things very refreshing and kept things very engaging in a good note, without making me feel exhausted by the game, which is an excellent design element that it requires all the worthy praise for it. And lastly, talking about the presentation, because that did come up a bit during the platforming section, it was again really amazing. It's a very unique approach to show the world of how the demons and the humans interact with each other, and that was really interesting to see. It was a bit more darker, it was a bit more grim, which is something that did push me off a bit, not gonna lie, but now that I'm coming in with a more of an open mind, it does actually feels really great and it is really well done. But more importantly, again, the impact on the gameplay is really significant and really great. The way the game transforms between Limbo and the real world, the animations that play out are just so exhilarating to watch. It is just amazing. It is very enthralling. But the game still did get its fair share of complaints, and I will still have to say that they are right. The thing is, DMC 2013 did carry a name with a legacy, and it failed to do proper justification to it up to a certain mark. Devil May Cry definitely is all about the combat. It is the identity of Devil May Cry, but so are its characters and the world that they are set in. More importantly, the characters. And when a different game takes up the mantle, it is important that they draw parallels and pay proper respect to the predecessors, especially when the predecessors are someone like the DMC cast. The primary complaint is, well, to be honest, the only complaint, because the rest of most of the characters are not even there, but yeah, Dante is not Dante. The new Dante over here definitely shares characteristic with the old Dante, where he's cocky, he's confident, he's very capable, but somehow he just comes off as a jerk. The old Dante, despite all his shenanigans, always came off as charming and kind of came off as cool and like a chill guy. But this new Dante is just someone that I'd like to punch him on the face. If I have to pull a comparison, I can say that the old Dante felt like Spider-Man. Cocky, fully capable, but has a charm to it and is likable. But the new Dante, even though having all those similar traits, he just has a tone, has a delivery that actually makes him feel more like a bully. I could not think of any characters of whom to represent him with, but hey, you can put in your own fantasy characters out there. But the end point is, he's just not likable. And with that, I suppose it is pretty clear that the primary mistake of DMC 2013 is the fact that it's a Devil May Cry game. Because if you think about properly, I've been praising about that game continuously, each and every element of it, be it gameplay, be it world building, or be it the story and the setting. I'm praising that game. I just love it. But the problem again comes into the fact that Devil May Cry, the original series, is a bit different than this. I've already put my point for Dante, and if I have to bring in for the rest of the world and the combat systems, the world of Devil May Cry, at least in DMC 4, even though is dark, is not grim, it's not sad, it's still somehow light-hearted, and I really prefer that kind of world, at least for this franchise. And coming on into the combat system, even though, as I already said, the free flow of the combat is there, but still there have been limitations, there are restrictions to the combat, and somehow at some level the combat did not exactly feel too varied, at least not as varied as the older DMC. You can see the major difference by the kind of weapons Dante carried in the older games and the ones that he carry in the newer games. Sure, they do definitely have different animations and function differently, but at the end result is still very much similar, or is very close to each other. On top of that, I have to we can see in the enemy designs, The enemy designs are not exactly nothing too special there. It's too gory. There's that's not kind of my cup of tea, but still I can look over it. But the fact that the enemies are kind of very basic is just something that felt very less artistic, and I think they should have done a better job with those. Now that said, combat wise, the enemies definitely worked really great. Being able to pull down shields and then knocking them off, or being able to counter off their tackles, excellent choices. But then again, they look boring.
That? Nah, that was just a big fat joke.
And lastly, we come into the bosses, which were decent by their own right. But if we compare them with the bosses that we had in the original Devil May Cry series, or even let's say for this context Devil May Cry 4, these bosses were very lackluster, and they just did not serve the purpose as being the big challenge in the game that we need to take out. But then again, everything feels fine, feels fun, feels great, if I forget that this is a Devil May Cry game. So I suppose everything comes down to one single thing that has been going on around the community recently, at least from what I have seen, that DMC 2013 is actually a really good game. It's just not a good Devil May Cry game.